Good morning. First, another round of applause for Governor Malloy and David Etzweiler. I know that we're all here in Washington, but we know that it's folks out in the states that are on the front lines of moving this enthusiasm around apprenticeship forward, and it's because of leaders like Governor Malloy that we're here today and that we're able to talk about how it is that we're going to take this across the country. So thanks to all of you in the states who've been working on this for years. Thanks for bringing what you know here to Washington so we can move a national conversation forward. The video that you just saw, speaking of what's going on here in Washington, is one of a series of things that's coming out from our U.S. Department of Labor, its Office of Apprenticeship. Folks may not know that back in 1937, so 80 years ago, Congress passed the Fitzgerald Act, which, amongst other things, really was the start of our National Registered Apprenticeship System. So we've been doing this for 80 years. And one of the things that the Department of Labor is going to be doing this year and moving forward is recognizing where it is that we've come over the past 80 years and looking into the future in terms of where it is that we're going to be taking apprenticeship in the U.S. in the 21st century. So let's have a round of applause for the Department of Labor for this video. You'll note that at the end of it, there was a hashtag. It was hashtag ApprenticeshipWorks, which is a hashtag that the department has been using to start to promote some of the work that they're doing. So we've got two hashtags that you all should be tweeting on. Hashtag apprenticeship and hashtag ApprenticeshipWorks. And I've been watching it. I haven't been tweeting, I'll admit, but I've been watching. There's been a lot of activity, so thank you for all of that. We greatly appreciate it. So let me invite our next panel to come up to the stage while we start to turn back to the work that we're doing in the states. And I want to acknowledge, in addition to the panelists that you're going to hear from in a couple seconds here, there's a number of states represented throughout this room. For one, many of the states who received apprenticeship accelerator grants over the past year were meeting in Washington this week, and many of them have stayed around in order to participate in this meeting for the past 2 days. Also, the State Directors of Career and Technical Education, brought together by Advanced CTE, one of our conference sponsors, they also had their conference in Washington this week, and many of those state directors are here as well. So we're well represented by state leaders who are doing work on the ground on these issues. And we've got an expert panel here to continue that conversation as well. So let me introduce Martin Simon, the Associate Director for the Center for Best Practices at the National Governors Association and one of our conference's sponsors, to kick off our next panel.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate all the energy in the room this morning and yesterday. It's great to have such a good turnout. At NGA, we're very pleased to be one of the sponsors for this great event, and we want to thank the funders for supporting this, but also the tremendous effort on the part of the National Skills Coalition and New America for pulling this all together. This wasn't an easy effort, and working with a whole group of sponsors also adds to that challenge. I'm sure we caused a few headaches along the way, but it all came together, and it's great to have such a good turnout, and from a state perspective, to have so many state folks here today. And I appreciate the opportunity to lead this state policy leaders panel this morning. As Andy said, states are really at the forefront of efforts to expand and diversify apprenticeship, where we see states taking a leadership role and putting in place the policy framework to create an environment where apprenticeship can flourish. Apprenticeship is expanding and diversifying, and it's great to follow Governor Malloy. You could see from his comments, he really understands the challenges of workforce and the important role that apprenticeship is playing in Connecticut and can play in states across the country. You're going to see that also from the 4 states that are going to share their experiences with you this morning. Delegate McCrae is caught in traffic. There were a couple accidents on his way in from Baltimore, so he'll be joining us shortly. I think you'll pick up from the discussion that each state takes a fairly unique approach to apprenticeship, but there are some common, I think, some common elements, and let me just highlight a few of those, and I think you'll see those in their comments during the discussion. One is that they're building partnerships across the state agencies and with the legislature. Not a single agency, if this isn't part of the goal of multiple agencies, it's just not successful. They're also investing and leveraging resources. It's not just one source that they're looking at, but they're looking at multiple sources for supporting apprenticeship efforts. They're also developing a good understanding of the industry and the labor market in their states. You've heard during the discussions yesterday many times the important role of connecting and strengthening those connections with business. I mean, you don't have apprenticeship unless employers are involved in it. They're also identifying targeted opportunities, and you'll see that in the comments from each one of our panelists. And finally, they're making a strong connection between apprenticeship and economic growth in their states. So at the National Governors Association, we're very much supportive of apprenticeship. We see it as an important element of the state's talent pipeline strategies. It's also an important element of career pathways and sector strategies. And we're partnering with the Department of Labor and the Siemens Foundation to support the American Apprenticeship Initiative grantees. That experience is allowing us to see the tremendous effort that's going on across the state by these grantees, also the state grantees, from the expansion grantees and the intermediary grantees. So I think we should applaud those efforts today. And this is where the rubbers meet in the road, and so a tremendous effort out there. So with that, I want to turn to the panelists. Since we're a little bit behind, I'm not going to give a deep biography, and Ellen didn't want me to do that anyway. Let me start with Ellen Gallbeck, who is the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Ellen is not only a state leader and is leading a strong effort on apprenticeship in Colorado, she's a national leader. She was former past president of the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, and there are many other areas that she's been involved in. Last March, Secretary of Labor Perez appointed her to the Workforce Innovation and Advisory Council, and Ellen is a constant advisor to NGA on workforce issues, so great to have you here, Ellen. We also have with us Myron Lynn, who is the director of the Iowa, deputy director of the Iowa Department of Workforce Development. Myron brings both a public service perspective, but also a private sector perspective. He was formerly employed by the Pella Corporation and held a variety of leadership positions there. He's also a veteran. He served 23 years as a commissioned military service officer, and then in his spare time when he's not focused on public policy, he officiates college and high school football, basketball, and softball. So a very diverse portfolio there by Myron. Next we have Carla Whitlock, who is the senior apprenticeship consultant with Apprenticeship Carolina. For those of you that aren't familiar with Apprenticeship Carolina, that's South Carolina's apprenticeship effort. Before joining this effort, Carla has a background that includes public accounting. She's part of one of the largest regional accounting firms. She works on tax credits and economic development. I think it's the economic development perspective that Carla brings to the discussion and adds her uniqueness to this discussion. Delegate McRae, you made it. The traffic, yes, just give him a hand. He had to fight his way through traffic this morning. Corey is the delegate for the 45th Legislative District in Baltimore, Maryland. He wears a lot of hats. He's an organizer, an entrepreneur, and a public servant, and he serves on a variety of committees in the Maryland legislature. When he's not doing his work as a delegate, he's also a small business owner, and he's an organizer for the local union. But one thing I really wanted to point out is that he brings a voice of experience as an apprentice. He had a 5-year apprenticeship with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So that's our diverse panel this morning. So let's get into the discussion here. And what I'd like each of you to do is just briefly describe what's the status of apprenticeship in your respective states. What's unique about your approach to apprenticeship, and then how is apprenticeship kind of a better solution to your talent pipeline strategies? Those are 3 loaded questions, but Ellen, would you start the conversation?
Thank you, Martin. And I want to add my thanks to the sponsors and partners of this amazing conference. It started yesterday at 7:30, and I have learned so much from so many of you in the room. And it's a privilege to be up here with my colleagues from Iowa, South Carolina, and Maryland. Martin, I think constant advisor translates into pain in the butt, but it's very nice of you to say so. 2 years ago, if we had this conference, I actually wouldn't be sitting up here, and it's only thanks to the incredibly hard work of my colleagues at the Department of Labor and Employment, the Colorado Workforce Development Council, and of course, our partners at CareerWise. In a word, the status of apprenticeships in Colorado is crazy. You heard a bit yesterday from Noel Ginsberg about CareerWise, which is the centerpiece of our youth apprenticeship work, our high school apprenticeship work in Colorado. But while it's the centerpiece, there's a lot of work, supporting work, that's going on around it. So let me start with our governor, because he's my boss, and I should always start with him. He's incredibly committed to this work, and in fact, he believes that economic development and workforce development are essentially the same thing, that you can't have one without the other. And he set a goal of Colorado being the healthiest state in the nation, which includes many facets, including increasing the middle class in Colorado by connecting people to careers. So in order to do that, he took several steps. He created the Bell Commission, the Business Experiential Learning Commission, through executive order, which is comprised of a minimum of 14 C-level executives, labor leaders, and agency leaders from throughout the state. He also created the Workforce and Education Subcommittee of the Cabinet, which is really a cross-agency collaboration of me and my colleagues with a common set of goals in order to achieve increasing the middle class in Colorado by connecting people to careers. And you can actually go on the state website and see the dashboard and see all of those goals. We've tied the work together thanks to the help of the Colorado Workforce Development Council. And within the Department of Labor and Employment, in order to support the work, we created the Work-Based Learning Unit. And all of these pieces leverage upon the previously built infrastructure that we had in our state. This is a business or industry-led, competency-based system that we are trying to create. And we're working with employers through trade associations, industry associations, or sector partnerships, which we believe is really the only way that we can scale and build up this work. And you heard from Noel yesterday that we've got pilots in 3 areas of the state that will start in September of this year in 4 different industries. So our goal is not just to fill the 44,000 open jobs that we currently have in Colorado, but it's actually to develop a statewide business-led system of high school apprenticeships in traditional and non-traditional industries, and to build a statewide culture of apprenticeships and a culture of lifelong learning, some of the lessons that we learned from our trip to Switzerland, and to create meaningful choices for students and adults through exploration and experiences. So what's unique to Colorado? I have like a 5-page list, but I'll keep it short. First, what's amazingly unique is CareerWise Colorado, which is an independent 501c3 organization that was created that is a public-private partnership in the truest sense to lead our youth-based work around apprenticeships. It's led by business, and it's outside of government. We don't control it, we help build it, we help enable it, and we help facilitate it. We had an incredibly, and still have, robust sector partnerships, which again we use to leverage our work. We created the Bell Commission, we have the Workforce and Education Committee. We have an electronic youth apprenticeship marketplace, thanks to partners like LinkedIn. We have shared staff between agencies and between our partners outside of government as well, whose sole focus is this work. So it's not staff who has this in addition to their current work, but sole focus is this apprenticeship work. And we have skillful.com, which is an online tool to help connect job seekers and businesses. That's a partnership through the Markle Foundation, the state of Colorado, and again, LinkedIn. And we also have Talent Found, which is our soon-to-be active common statewide messaging platform, and Gateway, Talent Gateway. I think the other piece that's important that I wanted to talk about is that there was no legislation in Colorado that mandated this work. We had an executive order, but no legislation that mandated the work. There's been legislation that's passed that's helped facilitate the work. And the other thing that I think is critical to Colorado is that we did not create any tax credits for apprenticeships. We believe that businesses need to have skin in the game and they need to be bought in from the very beginning, and that's what we're trying to do. And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you, Ellen. Before we go on to Myron, why CareerWise outside of government?
Well, if you're going to get businesses involved, not to be generalized, but businesses have a little bit of distrust of government. They see us as more of a bureaucratic and regulatory role as opposed to a role to actually help them do what they're doing. That's number one. Number two, it is business-led, not government-led. And number three, I would say what was critically important to us is that this work sustained through political and economic changes. And so we believed that it was critically important to have it outside of government.
Thanks. Myron, I know in Iowa, Governor Branstad has been a strong supporter of apprenticeship. Why don't you tell us about the Iowa experience around apprenticeship?
Yeah, and thank you very much. And thank you for all of you also for our common commitment to improving workforce in your state and across the country. And yes, I am a football official. I'm the only one on the panel that needs glasses, however. First of all, a little backdrop on the state of Iowa. The state of Iowa is known as an agricultural state, but it's also richly blessed with a number of high-tech businesses and STEM-reliant manufacturers in the state of Iowa. They include DuPont Pioneer, John Deere, Rockwell Collins, Vermeer Manufacturing, Pella Windows, where I was employed for a number of years, a number of smaller manufacturing businesses, but also Facebook and Google have located in the state of Iowa. So there's a high demand for high-tech and STEM-related people who are trained to be able to do the kind of jobs that they have. The other part of that is that Iowa's latest unemployment rate is 3.1%. So it really requires all hands on deck. Anybody who wants a job, we need to have them enter the workforce and get a job. The problem, of course, with that is that we aren't necessarily prepared with those number of people to take those jobs. And so apprenticeships have been a major part of the process. And so going back a couple of years ago, Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor, soon-to-be Governor of the state of Iowa, Kim Reynolds, and the legislature took upon a commitment to change that and to address the issues of the talent gap that was in the state of Iowa. And some people described it as a concern. but most of the businesses in the state of Iowa, and including the one that I was involved with for so many years, would have called it a critical issue. And so I think one of the most important issues that came about was in 2014 with the backdrop there of a very tight budget and some concerns with funding. The Iowa legislature, with coordination with the governor's office on a bipartisan manner, passed a bill called the Iowa Apprenticeship Program. And it provided today $3 million per year of support to businesses and to associations and sponsors who were going to provide these opportunities for apprenticeships. And from that fund, there is a commitment to provide the support to businesses to pay for classroom materials, for equipment, to management fees, the kinds of curriculum issues that might come up in terms of supporting that. And it has turned out to be one of the best opportunities in the state of Iowa for growing our workforce to being ready for the kinds of STEM and high-tech obligations going forward. What we've seen in that regard is, in the span of the last 12 months, an increase of 32% of registered apprenticeships in the state of Iowa. And that's on top of the immediate increases of registered apprenticeships from 2014 when the bill was originally passed. And one of the focal points that we've had in the state of Iowa is addressing what we would call the underrepresented groups. And I heard earlier today the comments from the governor talking about women and young girls entering the workforce and having their interest and their confidence in entering STEM-related areas. We're also focusing our attention on minority populations, on immigrants and refugees, those with disabilities. Those are the kinds of efforts that we're working with sponsors in the state of Iowa to make sure that we're addressing not only the needs of the business, but the needs of the people in the state of Iowa. And once again, it's all hands on deck in the state of Iowa. We need everybody to enter that workforce with the strength of what they learn in an apprenticeship program. So Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds and the entire legislature has been focused on making sure that Iowa is a workforce-ready state and allows us to fill those kinds of talent gaps that we've been experiencing.
Great. Thank you, Myron. Carla, South Carolina has been touted as one of the leading states in apprenticeship because you've been able to increase apprenticeship by, what, 700% or something to that effect. Why don't you tell us about the South Carolina story?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And it's so good to see this many apprenticeship disciples from all across the country that are here to learn more about successful apprenticeship programs. And Apprenticeship Carolina has been around since 2007, and we're a little unique in that we were the brainchild of our South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. Our leadership at the time saw the need for a substantive group that could help South Carolina companies register apprenticeship programs. And the Chamber wrote a white paper about the need and submitted it to our legislature. Our legislature was very, very positive and very supportive of Apprenticeship Carolina, and they actually included a $1,000 per registered apprentice state tax credit for our South Carolina companies in order to help offset some of the training costs that they may incur. So from 2007 until today, we are working with 876 companies all across different industries who've registered apprenticeship programs. And I'm proud to say, as of last night, we have over 20,000 South Carolinians who've either completed an apprenticeship program or are currently enrolled in a program. So we're very, very excited about those numbers and excited about our future. I did want to mention that the fastest growing segment of what we do is our South Carolina Youth Apprenticeship Programs, which actually came from business and industry wanting to start to build that workforce pipeline early. Is that familiar to everybody in the room? Our businesses in South Carolina are about to experience a silver tsunami, if you will, with retirees over the next few years. And our South Carolina companies have really caught on to the fact that it would behoove them to go into the high schools and career and technology centers to select students to potentially be that next generation of workforce. And these students are working in the afternoons, some weekends, and during summer breaks and Christmas break in order to get those on-the-job training hours. And the program continues to be very successful, again, across all different industries. And currently, we have nearly 160 companies that we're working with. And over the last 3 years, over 300 high school students have actually gone through or are currently going through a youth apprenticeship program. So we're very, very excited about that. But we could not do what we do and have the success that we've had without our strong partnership with our South Carolina technical colleges. Apprenticeship Carolina is part of the Division of Economic Development of the South Carolina Technical College system. And we work very, very closely with all of our colleges to make sure that our South Carolinians are trained the way that our companies need them to be trained. As we sit here today, over 65% of our apprenticeship programs include education from our technical colleges. And so we feel like that's a real benefit to our companies and our citizens in South Carolina. And just really quickly, I would like to recognize Mitchell Harp, who is here with Trident Technical College. Some of you may have had the opportunity to either talk to or hear Mitch speak yesterday about the very strong youth apprenticeship programs they have going on in Charleston, South Carolina. And Trident Tech is one of those colleges that do a great job in promoting apprenticeship and being real partners with us. At Apprenticeship Carolina, we have 6 consultants who work geographically across the state to actually go in and work with companies to develop the apprenticeship programs and walk them through the process of on-the-job training and job-related education and what a scalable wage looks like. And our consultants are actually the ones who, along with college representatives, who work with the companies to put these programs together and really walk the companies through the process of putting together the programs and sending them off to the Department of Labor for registration. And our consultants also work with companies to understand the different funding streams that may be available for different training and apprenticeships as well. So our consultants are the nuts and bolts of work with our South Carolina companies and our partners and with our technical colleges to bring all that together to make sure that our companies really know and understand what the entire process and picture looks like. I did want to mention that Apprenticeship Carolina is very grateful to have received 3 grants from the Department of Labor. We did receive an AAI grant, which we're working with. We also received an accelerator grant, which we're using those funds to expand apprenticeship industry by industry. And we also received an expansion grant to increase our youth apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs in South Carolina. Pre-apprenticeship is one of those areas that traditionally we have not done a whole lot of work in, but we're looking forward to expanding pre-apprenticeship with that particular grant. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank our partners with the Department of Labor at the state level, Charles Vaughn and Cleveland Williams, who help us to get our programs registered and to answer questions that our companies have. And if you are not connecting with your Department of Labor representatives, please do, because they are a vital part of your process as well.
Thank you, Carla. I have a question for you, but I'm going to wait and give Corey a chance. Thank you, Corey, for making extra effort to get in this morning, and glad to see you're here safely. You were part of a major piece of legislation that was passed in Maryland recently in support of apprenticeship. Would you tell us about that and how that fits into an overall effort to advance apprenticeship in Maryland?
Yep. Martin, first I'd just like to say thanks for the opportunity to be here. Thanks and honored to be able to sit among the colleagues across the country. And as I sit on the stage, I reflect, how did I even get into an apprenticeship? When I graduated from high school, like many young men, young women, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember my mom called the Department of Labor License and Regulation for the state of Maryland, and she said, send me a list of every apprenticeship program that you have.
Good mom, that's right.
So as I look out in this crowd, I think about the several hundred people, but looking, because there is some young man, there is some young woman that is trying to figure out what they're going to do, and apprenticeships is that opportunity. And I speak as being a 5-year graduate of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 24. And some of the things that we're doing in Maryland, Martin, in reference to youth apprenticeship, we know that when we can get to our young folks at an earlier age, they have a better chance at being successful in life. So we did a youth apprenticeship program starting in 2015, which was a pilot. They're piloted in the jurisdictions called Frederick and Western Maryland, and it's been a success for the state of Maryland. One of the things that we did this year, Martin, is the Power Apprenticeship Act, providing our workers education and readiness. And one of the things that we think about is that the state of Maryland doles out several $100 million all the time. It's $500,000 for this capital project, $1 million for this capital project, $2 million for this capital project. And one of the things that we think about is, as a small business owner, how can you make that buck work a little bit harder for you? And ensuring that we have registered apprentices on those projects when we're giving out $2 million, $10 million, $20 million to build our hospitals, our colleges, our universities, and the things that make our neighborhoods great. We have to make sure that those folks on those projects. I grew up in the city of Baltimore, and one of the things that we're just looking for is a job. But once you get past the job, you realize that the apprenticeship provides longevity, because there are 4 or 5 years of teaching you a trade or a craft or whatever it is that no one can take away from you. So I was proud to put forth the Power Apprenticeship Act. One of the things that I worked with Senator Rosapep on was the Career Apprenticeship Opportunity Act. And that's where we take the time to make sure that our state departments of education can put goals. We treat college and we treat universities and put them on a different plateau. But I always say that apprenticeships is that another form of college and universities, and we forget that. We've moved away from that. And the thing is that schools get scored in reference to how many students get sent to colleges and universities. But at the same time, I always tell my friends, when I graduated from the apprenticeship, I was 23 years of age, and I remember cracking $70,000, $80,000. And it's a lot of my friends that was 23 years of age that had college debt and making $40,000 or $55,000. So making sure that our Department of Education take this as serious as possible is one of the best things that we can do in any state. The other one was a bill we did last year, Martin, if I could just speak on it real quick. House Bill 676, when apprentices register, they give us all types of information. They give us where they live at, they give us, and when I mean when they register with our respective Department of Labor License and Regulations. But they give us the information of the ethnicity, the age, the address, the enrollment, the completion, and things like that. But the reality is the public doesn't know that information. So when we compare colleges and universities, we're seeing which one is putting out folks, which one is successfully graduating folks, which one is enrolling folks, which ones are a joke and which ones are not a joke. And we have to make sure that that information is not just to the public elected officials, but also that the public has that information so that they can know which apprenticeship that they can go to. And we have a phenomenal organization called TransEd who's working with a lot of different, taking apprenticeships in an untraditional and traditional way in reference to our hospitals, and we can leverage those relationships, tech, manufacturing, and data. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for painting a picture of how things look in your state. We heard yesterday during a lot of the discussions that expanding apprenticeship just isn't easy. So what are some of the key challenges you are facing or did face in the work that you're doing in your states to expand apprenticeship? Ellen, you want to start?
Thank you. So I think that helping businesses to understand that the investment and the return on investment is ultimately worth it and will work for them instead of against them. I think it's hard for businesses to think about that initial upfront investment in building an apprenticeship program. And one of the things that we did, Martin, as you know, and I think as Noel mentioned yesterday, is we took 48 business leaders, foundation leaders, higher ed leaders on a 5-day march through Switzerland. And I want to recognize Ambassador and Eric Levine, who are our hosts while we were there. They did a marvelous job. But I think that what that trip did for the business leaders that were involved was the seeing is believing. And that when you actually see kids who are 15, 16, 17 years old acting like adults, which is something we don't normally see in this country because the expectations for them are higher. And that those kids are actually seeing that what they're learning has applicability to what they might be doing in the future. And that is such a critical component for the kids and for businesses and frankly for government as well. I think, and somebody said it yesterday, either in the plenary or one of the smaller discussions, that apprenticeships need to be viewed as a beginning, not an end. That they are one stop on a career pathway through life. And we saw that so clearly in our trip to Switzerland, where people started it as an apprentice, and as Noel said yesterday, ended as a PhD. And I think the other thing that we saw there was that businesses are fully invested, not just their resources, but their time as well. That mentoring piece to apprenticeships, particularly high school apprentices, is just critical. And then I think the industry association work and the sector partnerships to see that they're not alone in this, and then that businesses can actually work together and pool their resources to develop the curriculum that they need, find the partner that they need to provide the training. I think all of that's incredibly helpful.
Let me go down this path since I was going to ask you about your trip to Switzerland. I saw a shift after that trip to focusing much more on youth apprenticeship. Talk a little bit about that.
Much more on youth apprenticeships, and I think that was the focus of our trip. And frankly, in Colorado, we have a problem that if you take 100 ninth graders, only ultimately 23 of them will graduate high school on time, finish college within 150% of the time, and then find a job. So somewhere there's 77 kids that are working their way through the system on their own. And we need, as a state and as a country, to find a way to help our kids get into the middle class, and we believe that apprenticeships is one of the ways to do that. It was amazing to see the change in the attitude of the people on board that bus, and yes, we were on a bus for 12 hours a day for 4.5 days with 50 people, including our governor. And to see the change in the people on that bus, the first day they were, it's nice, it works here, it'll never work there. The second day for them to say, well, maybe it might work in that industry for those kids. The third day to see the business leader say, wow, I think this actually can work in my industry for any kid. And then on the last day to have people actually making commitments about what they were gonna do when they got home. It's like we are now a group of 50 people evangelizing everywhere we go about high school apprenticeships.
And we've given you many opportunities to evangelize about that.
And we thank you for that.
Myron, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in Iowa?
Well, I don't know if we've had challenges. I hate to borrow at the risk of having 600 people groan when I say this, but borrowing a line out of an Iowa-based movie, if you build it, they will come. Go ahead, you can do that. But the fact of the matter is, Possibly the real issue that we might find that we still have to address is getting into the smaller supply chain businesses in the state of Iowa and making sure that they're recognized as a potential participant in the Iowa apprenticeship program. Once you bring that message, and that message is delivered to the manufacturers and to the engineering and the STEM type businesses in Iowa, there is little or no hesitation to move forward to participate in this workforce development type of development program. And one of the things that we've seen come out in the state of Iowa just in the last 9 months, Governor Branstad initiated the Future Ready Iowa program, which some of you have heard something about earlier. And that addresses the workforce going forward to the year 2025. And the fact is, registered apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, as Carla mentioned, and the other kinds of workforce development programs, they are going to lead us to the point where we're going to have that qualified workforce to fill those job vacancies and the job gaps by the year 2025. So Martin, I don't think we're finding a lot of problem here in getting it, perhaps other than the message to the smaller businesses in Iowa. Great. Future Ready Iowa is hopefully going to take care of that.
I'm going to jump past you, Carl, because I have a specific question I want to ask you. Corey, any particular challenges that you faced in Maryland as you were going down this path of expanding apprenticeship?
Yep. One of the things that I would encourage, Martin, is to reward the employers that's doing the right thing. So when we talk about registered apprenticeships, we know that that's the right direction. There's a lot of apprentices that's out there that may not be registered. And when you're not registered, the employer typically takes advantage of you. Sometimes you're an apprentice for 8, 9, 10 years and not moving forward. But when you are a registered apprenticeship with our respective Department of Labor license regulations, they have certain criteria that the employer has to abide by and the employee has to abide by. And as long as they're meeting those requirements, both people are successful, or both groups are successful. One of the things that I think about is just collecting the data. I talked about that. It's very, very important, especially in a district that I represent. I represent a district that has communities where 50% levels of poverty, 50% levels of poverty being that a family is making less than $25,000. So we need to make sure that these apprenticeships, that they're inclusive, that they're diverse, that they're representative of all communities and not just some communities, is one of the things that we always typically push. And so a lot of the legislation, you'll see that I don't like to give away tax incentives, but when that does happen, that we have criteria where it has to be at least a 25% level with that zip code of poverty. The other thing is just educating my colleagues is one of the barriers. I serve in a body where it's 141, myself included, and 47 senators in the other chamber. One of the things that I think about is that these are bodies made up of lawyers, these are bodies made up of business owners, but they don't really understand the apprenticeship field. So a lot of times I'll try my best to get my colleagues in these schools, get them in there, understand that apprenticeships aren't just on-the-job training, there's an educational component to it, and I think that it's a lot more longevity with that. So thank you again, Martin.
So you're really emphasizing the importance of the role of the legislature in putting together a policy framework, and that's been very important in Maryland. Carla, a twofold question for you. And Corey mentioned tax incentives. That's one of the key elements of the package, if you will. How important is the tax incentive to the success that you've had? And then back to the question on youth that I asked Ellen, you've shifted in the last couple of years to a real heavy emphasis on youth apprenticeship, and if you could address those two questions.
Okay. Well, as far as our tax credit goes for our companies, it's interesting. Some companies use it, and some companies say that they just want those skills and that education standardized. And it's completely left up to the company as to whether or not they take advantage of the tax credit. And just to clarify, it is a true tax credit. It is a one-page tax credit form that companies fill out at the end of their tax year. And we make the tax credit very simple. But again, I can't say that the tax credit is definitely the tipping point for the companies to make that decision. I would say that especially for some of our small and medium-sized businesses, they do take advantage of it to offset some of those training costs that occur. But to say that that's a real tipping point, I don't know if it makes that big a difference with some of our companies, because the way that our companies are working now, and based on what I've heard for the last 2 days, this is nationwide. Companies really want to make sure that they have those skills and to make sure that those skills gaps are covered. And any way that they can have that done through apprenticeship and then through additional tax credits and incentives, I think they want that. I would also like to say that when we do go and talk to our companies, we not only offer the tax credit for the companies, we are also offering them these grant opportunities, because the majority of our grant opportunities are geared toward paying for the education for our apprenticeships across South Carolina. So that's another added bonus for our companies. In terms of the youth apprenticeship programs, that came out of absolute necessity for our companies. And our youth apprenticeship program started with one German-owned company that had moved into Aiken, South Carolina. And as part of their move to Aiken, one of the caveats was they would be able to put together an apprenticeship program that mirrored as closely as possible to their home country's program in Germany. And Robert Crenshaw, who is one of our consultants in the Aiken area, worked very closely with Aiken Technical College and the local school district in order to put together this pathway where students could begin to learn about MTU actually in the 9th grade, and then eventually make their way into potential internship and then youth apprenticeship opportunities in the 11th and 12th grade. And MTU is actually getting ready to graduate, I believe, their fifth round of youth apprentices out of their facility. And the majority of those students are still working there and have continued their education at Aiken Tech. MTU also offered another layering of credential through the German American Chamber of Commerce. They actually had the German Chamber come in for the last 2 years, and these students are actually going through the testing piece for the German Chamber. So these students are coming out with high school diploma, credentials from the local high school and Career and Technology Center, credit to continue their education at Aiken Tech, plus, if they pass it, the German credential as well. And so with that one program, it blossomed. Our boss at the time, we started to get a couple more calls from different companies wanting to know a little bit more about youth apprenticeship. And at the time, he said, we're not doing youth apprenticeship. That's not what we're doing. Well, 6 months later, we had like 10 more phone calls, and we decided we got to do it. So with that, our companies, again, all across all different industries, are really starting to see the benefit of beginning to pick that workforce pipeline early.
Great. Thank you. I know we're nearly out of time. One last quick question for all of you. Always wondering how you're going to sustain this effort. So what are your key strategies for sustaining the progress that you've made in your respective states? Again, we'll start with you, Ellen.
So I think the building of CareerWise is one way of sustaining it. And then I think embedding it in our culture within the Department of Labor, the Department of Education, K-12, and assuring that the work will go on despite who the leadership in this state is one of the ways. And listen, the other way is businesses. Mm-hmm. You know, once businesses see the value in this, they're going to be the ones who help sustain this work.
Thanks. Myron?
And I agree with Ellen. The commitment in our K through 12 programs with youth apprenticeship programs, I really think that's going to be one of the keys to continue the success of apprenticeship programs, and businesses will jump right on that because we need those trained folks.
Great, thank you. Carla?
I think ours will also come with just the continued synergy around apprenticeship through all different types of industries. And the more that we get our stories out there about successful apprenticeship programs across South Carolina, the more businesses are going to be interested and want to be involved. And we do, from a sustainability standpoint, we do have some very, very good support from our governor and our state legislature. And again, our 16 technical colleges to make this all work for everybody.
Great. Corey, last word here.
Martin, I think that it's continuing to build on the youth apprenticeships as stated before, lifting up the employers that's doing the right thing and continue to lift the standard for every employer, and then analyzing that data. And I say that in thinking back, being from Baltimore, it's always a grind, it's always a hustle. And when I was introduced to the apprenticeship, you're telling me that I can make money on a job and make money at school. I thought they were going to put me out my third year because I was like, this has got to be a hustle. But there are employers that value their employees and know that the best training is how you move forward. Thank you.
I noticed you all mentioned employers as part of sustainability. Thank you all for the great work you're doing in your states and for sharing your insights today.
Another big hand for the panel this morning.